Today I'm putting up with Doc T. I'm going to be making my famous pizza dough and pizza following that. And I've already gone ahead and I've started my yeast, recorded a video to show how to do that. You can go to that. I'll have a link to it from in the article. And so my yeast is already starting to grow. One of the things that I want to do before I add it to my bowl is I want to make sure that my bowl is warm, because I like to have a friendly location for that yeast to grow, and it likes to grow in warm weather. The other thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to preheat the oven, because I don't have a proofing oven. So I just use my oven. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it to bake for 350, and I'm going to run that for 1 minute. And when that's done, I'll go ahead and turn off that oven. That will bring it up to a temperature that's really nice for getting pizza dough to rise. So I've got my my bowl getting warm. I've already added my yeast, a little bit of olive oil to the yeast to get it going. Now what I'm going to do is, the recipe for this calls for 2 cups of water and about 6 cups of flour. Now those 6 cups can vary. The way that I'm going to do it today is I'm going to use 2 cups of whole wheat flour, and I'm going to use the rest from an unbleached flour, sort of an all-purpose, unbleached all-purpose flour, and I'll add those to this as we go. So there's my timer. I'm just going to shut off my oven now. And there's just a nice heat in there that will allow it to become a proofing oven. I have already heated up my bowl, so it's ready to go. Take this off, makes it a little easier. So I'm just going to put my bowl into my stand mixer. Stand mixer makes this really nice. You can do this without a stand mixer. It just takes a little bit more time. You need to stir the flour in the dough and make a sort of a bowl of the flour, and then add your liquid into the middle of that and just slowly start mixing. You don't want to add all your flour at once, just like we're not going to add all the flour to this at once. We're going to add a little bit at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and add my yeast mixture that has been getting all frothy and beautiful for me. That is ready to go. And I'm going to add my wheat flour first. And the reason that I do that is it takes a little bit more time to get the wheat flour to absorb the moisture. So I always add my wheat flour first. And this is a stone ground whole wheat flour, just because that way you get what nature meant for us to have. And I do mix it with an all-purpose flour, because that's really a texture thing. But the wheat gives it so much more flavor than if you do it. Because you can do it all with all-purpose flour, but the wheat gives it that extra flour. Actually, if you're just starting, I'd recommend you go ahead and start it with the all-purpose flour and let it go like that. Just because it's a little bit easier to do, and you'll get that first success, and then you can start introducing the whole wheat flour. So on this stand mixer, it doesn't want me to go past 2 when I have the dough hook in. So the dough hook is the contraption that you're going to want to use when you are making really any kind of flour. And it doesn't want me to go past 2, because it's really hard on the motor of that when you're using your bread hook. So I'm going to let that go a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding the extra dough, or the extra flour, into that dough. One thing I want to do is just every once in a while, if it's not really grabbing a hold of that flour, shut this off and just stir the flour so that you don't, so that it all gets mixed up well. Now the most of that comes from the dough hook, and it does a great job of it. I'm just scraping it to get it off the bottom. Ultimately though, that dough hook is going to grab any flour that we put in there, as long as there's enough moisture in there, and it's going to combine it into a ball. So now that wheat flour has had a little bit of time to mix up, and I always make a mess doing this, but I just slowly add sort of a half cup or a cup at a time, so that gets me up to 3. And you'll see it incorporates it pretty quick. There's 4. I'm going to go ahead and go to 5 because the target is 6 cups. I'm going to go to 5, and then I'm going to let it work its thing, and I'm going to watch and see what that dough turns out like. Because ultimately the amount of flour isn't based upon measurement, it's based upon the consistency of the dough. And you can hear that motor. You can hear how it's starting to strain that motor as it's turning into more of a dough and less of a frothy mixture. Let me slow that down a little bit and you can see what it's doing. Basically it's doing the same thing as if you had it on a breadboard and you were pushing it with your heel. Basically kind of grabbing the dough, pushing it, grabbing the dough, pushing it, and each time adding a little bit more flour to the mixture. So that's the same concept as if you were making this by hand, is add more flour and knead it. That's the word, it's kneading it. And what that kneading is doing is it's stretching that dough so that the gluten has the ability to have the structure to hold that air inside of it as it sort of ferments and rises. That's a crucial aspect of this, and that's why you have doughs, that yeast doughs, that's why we let them rise, because that's what the rising is it's the dough capturing those air bubbles and incorporating them into the dough itself. Now you can see with this dough, as it's pushing it around, it's getting more and more less spinning within the dough and more spinning the dough and pushing the dough. That's what you want it to do. And if you're using a stand mixer, you want it to be to a point where it sort of is all one ball. Now I can always add more flour later, and in fact when I start rolling it out I will incorporate more. One of the things that I want to do, I'm going to let this go for a while, but I'm going to stop it right now. You can reach in and you can touch, and this is not real sticky, it's a little bit sticky, and that after you make this a while, that's one of the things that allows you to know just how much flour you need to have in there, is whether or not it's a sticky dough. But it needs to be resilient, it needs to have sort of a smooth texture to it, and you don't want it, in pizza dough case, you don't want it too sticky, because this is a dry dough. There's not going to be anywhere for it to do it. So I've added, maybe about 1/3 of a cup. So this time I'm getting to 5 1/3 cups. I'm not going to make it all the way to 6, but if I need to, I'll incorporate more dough after I've let it rise. So I've taken the bowl that I'm going to let the dough rise in, and I've added the hot water to get it up to temperature. I'm just going to dry out a little bit of that moisture that's in there because I don't want to add more moisture. And I'm taking the dough hook off, and then I take my dough, and before I add it to the bowl, what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of oil to the bowl just so that it doesn't stick. So I like to just use this little olive oil spray, just take a little bit of that. My dough at this point should be where you can pull it and it stretches but doesn't rip. So put it in there, and then I'm going to let that sit in the oven that I proofed earlier. But what I want to do is I want to add just a layer of protection over it. I add, again, just hot water, just a little bit of then I squeeze most of that water out of there. I don't want it wet, I just want it damp, and that just sort of makes for that nice moist environment that it's going to sit in. I put this in the oven and I let that rise until basically it's doubled or so. Now, in this case, I need to move that rack. And you can tell by my ability to touch that rack that it's warm but not hot. You don't want it hot in there. So that's going to sit, and normally I let it sit for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before I take it out and start working on it. This stock tea, I'll have more for you in a little while. Bye-bye.